I am the campaign organizer. And that is a reminder that we are recording this. We want to make sure that this is available later on in the future. Because of this, we are asking all participants to hold on questions until the end. And just to make sure that your microphone is muted and that way we don't have any feedback. And I will go ahead and hand it over to my great co-host, Nicole Reyes Palma. She is our regional director in advocacy.
Thank you so much, Daisy, and thank you all for coming and joining us today. It's so special to have somebody like Elizabeth Armijo here. And what makes her so special? Well, apart from the fact that it's an honor because she's a legend, Elizabeth Armijo is the National Director of Legislative Advocacy. She has worked in different capacities within Compassion and Choices since 2012. She started with growing a grassroots base of supporters in New Mexico and leading 2 legislative campaign initiatives, which led to the passage of the law in 2021. Her responsibilities were then expanded across multiple states, across the Western region, and then nationally. She currently supports teams across the country who are working to expand end-of-life care options, protect and defend options, and teams who are working to empower everyone to chart their own end-of-life journey by ensuring that everyone is informed, empowered, and engaged. Without further ado, Elizabeth Armijo, our amazing presenter today.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Daisy. No pressure. I really appreciate that introduction. I also appreciate the invitation to join you today to discuss the journey of how a bill becomes a law. As Daisy and Nicole mentioned, my name is Elizabeth Armijo, and I'm the National Director of Legislative Advocacy. And I have the pleasure of working with multiple teams across the country. And I want to thank Daisy, Nicole, and all of the volunteers who have been working in Florida to empower everyone to chart their own end-of-life journey by ensuring that everyone is informed, empowered, and engaged. And I know you are all doing great work there, so thank you. Today, I wanted to talk about the journey to expand end-of-life care options, specifically the work being done to pass medical aid in dying legislation. As you may know, medical aid in dying is the end-of-life care option by which a mentally capable, terminally ill adult with 6 months or less to live requests a prescription from their healthcare provider for medication they can choose to self-ingest to peacefully end their suffering. Today, more than 1 in 5 people have access to the end-of-life care option. It is currently available in 11 jurisdictions. 10 states, Oregon, Washington, Vermont, California, Colorado, Hawaii, New Jersey, Maine, Montana, New Mexico, and the District of Columbia have authorized this option, and 7 of those have authorized since 2015. For many of these states, it's been a long journey. For example, in New Mexico, their efforts started 24 years prior to their passage in 2021. And Hawaii worked on it for about 2 decades. And I want to share all of that because the time frame for the legislative process varies. It can be as short as 1 legislative session, or it could take decades. The medical aid in dying legislation that we work on includes time-tested safeguards. Most notably, the dying person is in charge of the process from start to finish, must be able to self-ingest the medication, have at least 1 provider confirm that the adult is mentally capable, has a medical prognosis of 6 months or less to live, and is not being coerced. This is a multi-step request process, and additional regulations exist. All of those regulations are in addition to the education, the training, and the oversight that govern the practice of medicine for any healthcare. Medical aid in dying is entirely optional for both the provider and the patient, and nobody is forced to participate. And the availability of the option brings people comfort during the dying process. This year, medical aid in dying legislation was introduced in 19 states, and we actually anticipate a few more. 9 of the states were carryover states, which means that they had a 2-year legislative session from 23 to 24. And those states include Delaware, Iowa, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. 10 states filed during the 2024 legislative session, and those states included Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Missouri, Rhode Island, Tennessee, and Virginia. We have robust campaigns in many of these states. We also are building capacity in others. Prior to our advocacy campaigns in the state, we looked to identify the potential political makeup of the state legislature. We worked to determine the governor's status and support of the bill. We researched the voting records for legislators to see what kind of legislation they voted on or sponsored previously. And we also identified the potential committees that the legislation might be assigned to. In collaboration with teams of volunteers and supporters, we also work to have an understanding of the lay of the land. Is there a level of support for medical aid and dying among state voters? Was polling previously conducted? Is there a base of supporters who are interested in advocating for the change and helping with the campaign? What organizations or coalitions could be potential allies? What is the stance of the local medical society? Are there local chapters of the national organizations that support the movement? And what are our strongest oppositions or threats? These are elements considered when determining resource capacity. States that do not have a majority of these elements, we consider as capacity building states, where we work with volunteer teams to develop the criteria over time. So should political winds change, we are positioned for success. Circling back to the introduction of legislation, every state has its own set of rules for considering and enacting bills. Each state legislature will provide an explanation of their process. And understanding the basic rules that guide the movement of bills through the legislative process will help you understand why the bill has reached its current progress or not, and is likely and its likelihood for future success. Let's quickly go over the basic journey of a bill. But first, I'd like to mention that every state, and I talked about this earlier, but every state has its set of rules for considering and enacting bills, and most legislatures are bicameral. So that means that they have two chambers. The exception is Nebraska, which only has one. But the states that are bicameral usually have a lower house, which has more members that represent smaller geographic areas, and an upper house, which has fewer members that represent larger geographical areas. The lower house is often called the House or the Assembly, and the upper house is called the State Senate. Most legislatures start in January or February, but vary in length. This is important because lawmakers use the months preceding their legislative sessions to collect ideas for bills. If you have an idea for legislation that you'd like to introduce, you need to hit the ground running right after the election. So let's talk a little bit about the basics of a bill. A bill is drafted, it's introduced in the House or the Senate, and sometimes both. There will hopefully be committee action, then there will be floor action, and if successful, it will start over in the other chamber and repeat the process. If each chamber passes a different version of the bill, a conference committee can be formed to work out the differences before sending it to the governor. In most states, the governor can sign a bill into law, allow a bill to become law without signing, or veto it, like we saw in Nevada last year. A vetoed bill can return to the legislature for a possible override as well. So let's talk about how a bill or an idea becomes a law in Florida. And I'll note that the Florida legislature meets in session every year for 60 days. This year it ran from January 9th through March 8th. Your Senate has 40 members who are up for re-election every 4 years, and that's staggered. And the House has 120 members who are up for election every 2 years. Here's a graphic that the Florida State Legislature shared on their website that explains the journey. Pretty intimidating, huh? So let's break it down. A constituent, such as yourself, can develop an idea and request that a legislator introduce it. A legislator may propose a new bill. The bill is drafted and the language is carefully crafted to address specific issues or concerns. Either house may originate any type of legislation. However, the process differs slightly between the houses. A legislator sponsors a bill, which is then referred to one or more committees related to that bill's subject. The committee studies the bill and decides if it should be amended, pass, or fail. And committees are specialized groups of legislators who examine bills related to specific policy areas. Committees may hold hearings, gather expert testimony, and discuss the bill before deciding whether to recommend its passage. If passed, the bill moves to other committees or references or to the full House. The bill is presented to the full House or Senate for debate. Members may discuss the bill, propose amendments, and ask questions. A majority vote is required for the bill to pass to the next stage. If it passes in one house, it is sent to the other house for review. A bill goes through the same process in the second house as it did in the first. A bill can go back and forth between houses until a consensus is reached. Of course, the measure could fail at any point in this process. As I mentioned earlier, there's a conference committee, and in Florida, there is a conference committee. So if the two chambers pass different versions of a bill, a conference committee may be appointed to reconcile those differences. And once both chambers agree on the final version, the bill is sent to the governor for approval. The governor can sign the bill into law, allow it to become law without signature, veto it, or use a line item veto for appropriation bills. If signed, the bill becomes law and typically takes effect on a specific date. There are times when all of this may seem overwhelming, but a good place to start is by knowing your lawmakers. There are times when we have questions, and if we have a connection with those lawmakers or a relationship with those lawmakers, we can reach out to them and work with them. So lobbying your legislators is an opportunity to engage in the legislative process. Make your voice heard and be a part of a movement. It's also the chance to establish that ongoing dialogue and relationship. Become a trusted advisor on this end-of-life issue or other issues that are important to you. In addition, legislators can inform you on the legislative process when you have questions. So remember, advocacy is that simple act of participating in democracy. You are the constituent who votes and who has ideas and who has opinions about how to improve the lives of the people in your community. And a big part of a legislator's job is to listen to voters like you. So share those ideas, share your voice, share your story. That personal approach is impactful and powerful. And that's a little bit about how a bill becomes a law. I know that was a lot to kind of unpack and to digest, so we can definitely walk through it today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your presentation. And it is complicated, but definitely we need those beginning steps, those conversations with our legislators. There's so much information out there, and that's why this is so helpful. So really thankful to you. And I also want to talk a little bit more about Florida. So I'm just going to provide a brief summary. The Florida Medical Aid in Dying bill history starts in 2020. Compassionate Choice is introduced SB 1800 in the Senate. The medical aid in dying legislation was called Death with Dignity. This was sponsored by Senator Rader. The bill was referred to the Healthcare Policy and Judiciary Committee, but unfortunately, it said it was indefinitely postponed and withdrawn from consideration, thus dying in the Healthcare Policy Committee. We're going to move forward to 2023. Our partners Florida Death with Dignity introduced bills SB 864 and House Bill 1231. This was an exciting moment for us and for everyone in the movement, as there was an accompanying House bill. Unfortunately, as previously the other bills, they died in the Healthcare Policy Committee. And following the 2023 bill, we find ourselves here on 2024. On January 5th, 2024, Senator Victor Torres introduced SB 1642, and Representative Darrell Campbell introduced HB 561 in the House of Representatives. Despite both bills being assigned to committee once again, they did not advance further, mirroring the path of the 2023 bill introduction. Of course, for more information about the bill history, the language, and any other questions regarding to these bills specifically, you can visit the Compassionate Choices Florida website, or you can visit our partner's website, Florida Death with Dignity. And we'll have Daisy provide that information on what the link is so you can click on it. In Florida, we're diligently working on various fronts. Perhaps one day we will be in a position where a bill may pass. This progress is made possible through building community, creating impactful partnerships, strategic outreach, and storytellers. We need as many storytellers as we can to tell your story to the legislators. You're welcome to follow along on our journey as well by visiting our Florida Facebook page, where we list all of our upcoming events. I'm going to stop recording at this time, and I'm going to allow everyone to have an opportunity to go ahead and have some questions. Thank you all.